For so long and for so many decades, people have said, here's how you heal from infidelity. Do this, do this, do this, and you're off and running. My friends, it doesn't work that way. And if you can have an understanding of developmental trauma in your partner and how it's affecting their recovery, particularly in this scenario that we'll talk about today, your recovery can get easier, I promise you. Your recovery can get richer. Your understanding of each other and understanding what you need and what your partner needs will completely change. I hope that you enjoy this interview with Michael Webb. I know that it will be a true game changer for your own recovery as well as your relationships. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Samuel. Thank you.
So you are a great friend. You're an expert. You have so much to give in the world of trauma and addiction and infidelity. Why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your practice, just help them understand where you're coming from.
So I've been in practice about 21 years, going on 22, and spent the first 10 years just working in addictions in treatment centers, ultimately training counselors, and then went into private practice. And that's where I've been for about the last 11, going on 12 years, treating primarily developmental trauma, not PTSD that occurs in adulthood, but traumatic experiences that interfere with the development of the child throughout, their childhood, and then how it affects them as adults.
And everything that you've just said, you've helped me with. You are not only just a best friend, but someone that has helped me in my own issues. And I refer you out frequently. You have become an expert in infidelity and addiction. And we're going to launch right in, and I'm going to start with an issue that I felt like you had so much to give because you helped me in this area. And we're going to start with men. And what I have learned, and you and other therapists have taught me this, but we used to try and heal from infidelity in this vacuum. Like, just look, it's going to take forgiveness, reminders, triggers, intrusive thoughts, or if addiction, you're going to have to work on curtailing the addiction and working around it and all this stuff. And we kind of got lost in this vacuum. But the reality is, if we don't deal with childhood stuff, if we don't deal with what is your specialty, the recovery process is so hard. So today I want to start with scary mom issues.
All right.
Because that is something that I'll tee it up. So the unfaithful male has blown it. He's wrecked his life. He has brought on complete insanity because of his choices. Now his betrayed female spouse is upset, angry, devastated, traumatized, dealing with betrayal trauma. But he has scary mom issues. And so he has maybe even married his mom. He is experiencing so much that he doesn't even understand, that I didn't even understand. So my first thought is, Michael, talk a little bit about scary mom issues and how it affects the male unfaithful spouse.
So yeah, a boy's relationship with his mom is the template that is used later on in his life to understand what women want from him. And it begins with what his mom wanted from him, how she treated him. Did he get his needs met? Could he ask for his needs? Or is it possible that when he asked for his needs to be met, even up to and including before he could talk, crying, how was that responded to? Ideally, the mom attunes to the child's needs, to their emotions, and they reflect and mirror that back to the child. So the child gets an understanding of what they feel and how they appear.
Right.
But if you've got a scary mom, you've got a mom whose needs come before the child. And so instead of the child being treated in a way where they're getting an understanding of how to take care of themselves and how to be who they are in the world, what they learn is how to be fixated and to focus on the needs of mom so that if I take care of her well enough, then she can turn around and take care of me.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. Now I can hear the betrayed spouse might go, okay, how is this scary mom issues? But there's a timeline to this, right? Because this in no way, and for those of you that are watching, you're never going to hear, I say this every opportunity I have, but you're never going to hear either Michael or myself or any therapist worth their salt say, well, if he'd have just done this, he wouldn't have cheated. That's ridiculous. Let's throw that out. That's never going to come from us. We are talking about the mindset of the unfaithful male and how this creates such drama. So, okay, take it from there. How does that then impact the unfaithful trying to work with their betrayed partner?
So what we're talking about here is a guy who has a misunderstanding of women, especially a woman who is self-aware, trying to have a reciprocal relationship with her husband.
Right.
She is expecting him, for example, to ask for what he needs and to actually advocate for himself. However, what we're talking about here is a child who learned that you can get punished for asking for what you need.
Right.
And so you can't go at it directly. Well, when we can't ask for what we need, when we don't have the power or if we're vested with the authority to just say, hey, I want a glass of water, it's more like you go into the kitchen and like, man, it's a hot day.
Yeah.
I sure am thirsty.
Right.
Because if I just say, hey, mom, can I have a glass of water? She'll be like, well, what did you do for me today? So we're talking about a man who believes that if he asks for what he needs, or God forbid, confronts not getting what he needs, he's going to lose, and he's going to end up worse off than he started.
Because that's what we are telling ourselves. That maybe isn't even what the betrayed female is doing, but this is the prison we have built in our minds, right?
Exactly. And you can't dismiss the role of projection here. Mm-hmm. This woman could be great. She could be wonderful, but he's projecting all of the fears and insecurities instilled in him by mom onto his wife, which can be very confusing for her. Because, for example, she may say, hon, what do you want for dinner? Only, let's say she's a little stressed. She's had a hard day. There's a little bit of energy behind her request.
Right.
He stares at her like she asked him, how are we going to get to the moon today?
Right, exactly.
He's frozen because it's triggered these issues. That request, that very basic, simple request, actually feels like a threat. And so he says, I don't know, what do you want? Well, nobody likes to make all the decisions in a relationship.
Right.
Nobody wants to decide where we eat every night or what we watch on TV. But that's what may end up happening, is that because this guy may either be afraid to say what he wants, or if the abuse or the neglect was bad enough, he may truly have no awareness of what he wants. He is sitting there essentially waiting for opportunities to be pleasing, to be comforting, to be rewarding, in the hope that he's going to get his needs met, which he's never expressed.
And so we have this, in my own case, then we eventually kind of flip out and we lie to ourselves and say, well, you don't like us and you're never happy with us and you're never comfortable and I can never be right and I'm a fourth kid and I'm this and I'm that, all because we have this. And you're laughing because, I mean, this is so real. We have all this unresolved stuff inside of us, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the difference in reality here can be very stark. Because let's say this man believes, because mind you, what we're talking about here is an ego state, essentially a snapshot of who that man was at 5 or 6.
Right.
And that part of him is having a relationship with his wife. Only she thinks she's married to a grown-up.
Right.
And so his reality of it is, because you're an adult, mom/wife, you should know what I need without me asking. In fact, if I have to ask, that may really kind of mean that you don't care that much about me.
Right, because if you loved me, you would know what I need, even though I've never really had the guts or the wherewithal, or even kind of like you're saying, let me be more gracious, even just the knowledge to say, honey, I need to express these needs. And that leaves us in a position where we're expecting so much out of this woman that's just unrealistic and unfair, right?
Absolutely. It's unrealistic, it's unfair, and it can actually become hostile for no particular reason. Because we're talking about a guy with the needs of an adult male. So, he's wanting to have a sex life. He's wanting to be appreciated for mowing the yard and for doing this or for doing that. Or he's even wanting to be appreciated for all of the ways that he's sacrificing for her that he never mentioned he was doing.
Exactly. And we live in this private, I guess I'd say, angst, anger, and then the resentment starts to build. And then here's where we land the plane. Then we go out and we have an affair because we have told ourselves about this reality inside of us that justifies our affair, justifies our seeking of attention, getting our needs met, and all of this stuff, because in this particular scenario, because we're not trying to overgeneralize every single scenario, but in this particular scenario, we, the unfaithful male, have lied to ourselves. We have become, in many ways, self-deceived. Am I right?
Yes, self-deceived. But, when you're talking about psychological dynamics, it's hard to look at it, or it's hard to talk about it without it sounding very mechanical and obvious.
Right, sure.
And also that I'm describing something that happened and is felt this exact way.
Right.
Which every individual is going to be a little bit different. But generally speaking, we're talking about a guy that is unaware that he has deceived himself about who he is, who he's seen as by his wife, who his wife is, and all the way down to what he needs. He may have this predisposition to believe, for example, that, okay, what I'm supposed to do is take care of my wife, take care of my family, take care of my job, and then go off and take care of myself. Because asking for what I need is scary. Asking for what I need could potentially get me hurt. So what you've got here is this guy who is self-deceived and is in some ways a victim of his own behavior.
Right.
And the thing is, and at some point, whenever I'm describing these things to somebody, I want to say, I'm a parent. And I understand also there's almost no parents out there that ever intended on hurting their kid in any way.
Right, absolutely.
These things travel through generations, and they can travel through generations in a very unconscious manner.
Right.
And so this guy's mom did not intentionally set him up. She was doing the best she could with what she had. And so is he.
Yeah.
And so is his wife.
Absolutely.
What's happening here is that because of this tremendous lack of awareness of what's going on and the poor communication between he and his wife, and for that matter, between he and himself, that every action that he's doing is based on a reality that may be 25, 30 years old, or maybe not exist at all.
You're exactly right, because I know when you helped me unravel so much of what was going on inside of me, I made the connection of, wow, I had made myself the judge, the jury of everybody's behavior, living in my own personal prison. So now I know that this is hard. I know that I'm asking you to do something really immensely kind of difficult, but in a quick snapshot for the sake of the video, what should this unfaithful male do? What is a short snippet of a timeline of how they can heal and try to set themselves free from this prison that they are living in?
No problem. That'll be easy. So I've got to throw one other thing in there, that
Please do.
this guy has a raging internal critic. They have not differentiated fully from their mom, which means their mom is still in their head, being neglectful or potentially tyrannical, or simply just critical, maybe a little too controlling. And so when you ask, what does this guy do to recover? To begin with, it's, the very, cliche idea of recognizing that this is happening in me.
Yeah.
I am having this experience and it's a real thing. And possibly I need to question what I'm telling myself. I need to start checking out if my beliefs about what my wife thinks and feels are accurate, and then be willing to listen and believe what she says, rather than often these guys will also see and feel that compliments and affirmation are actually a setup.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get me to lower my defenses.
Exactly. And that's where, and for you that are watching, this is why it's so important that we learn these facets, because a husband and wife or partner can be trapped in this vortex of perpetual misunderstanding, perpetual blame shifting, stonewalling. You're the bad guy. No, you're the bad guy. Well, you had the affair. Well, yep, I'm the bad guy forever. And it's not about finding the bad guy. It's about how do we set ourselves free and save this dang relationship, right? And so again, continue to speak to, what does this guy do? So he has to accept that this might be happening and trust. And this is so hard for the unfaithful because we're so angry, we're so justified. But he has to be willing to receive, I think Gottman says, he has to be willing to receive influence from his betrayed partner. Am I right?
Yes. Which, there's a paradoxical situation here where he has now actually damaged a relationship. And the person that he has hurt, he's being asked to hear, to let her words and her actions actually impact him.
Yeah.
And he spent his whole childhood developing a buffer.
Right.
To where intimacy with a female is not going to happen because it's just going to hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
And so part of what this guy needs is to recognize that he does have this little guy inside of him. This kid that did not get some of the developmental needs met that are required to have an intimate relationship as an adult.
Right.
And begin to listen to and actually develop a relationship with this kid.
For those of us that are a little bit older, we've grown up, right, during the 70s and 80s, it was healing the inner child and the wounded child, but we didn't really know the stuff that we know now. And so I think we are more open to the fact that, hey, there could be some wounds inside of me. And so I want to deviate for 1 minute. Maybe speak to I want you to give the betrayed female some suggestions in a few minutes, but I don't want to lose my train of thought that I think that it is important for you to explain to the betrayed that this is a very real reality that is going on inside the unfaithful male that he may not even be aware of. What do you say to the betrayed partner to help them understand that their partner isn't schizophrenic? It's not that they necessarily have this multiple personality disorder, although that does exist, and you've dealt with that in different clients. But help them in this moment understand that this is a real thing. And that this isn't a license to justify their affair or addiction or multiple affairs, but this might be going on inside of them, right?
Absolutely. And, considering the situation that the betrayed spouse finds herself in, he's already been blowing smoke all this time. I need to believe, in order to hold my sanity together, he's a liar. Yeah. He's manipulative. He's dishonest. Mm-hmm. He has deliberately, purposefully gone behind my back. And now you want me to believe he's got this little brat inside of him that I need to coddle? Are you kidding me? Well, no, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Correct.
What I am saying is that trauma exists. And the best way to describe it is that it's a memory problem.
Mm.
An experience from the past that is unprocessed gets refelt and sometimes acted out in the present.
Oh my gosh, that's so, whew, I want to take a deep breath and smoke a cigarette because that's so true.
And so your husband, in his interactions with you, has reenacted traumatic experiences that he had with his mom hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And you may be able to pick up on the differences, the nuances in his behavior, his speech, his cadence of speech, how he talks. Do you see him staring up into space? There are lots of freeze response, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow yourself to recognize that experience from the past being re-experienced in the present has occurred, then the next step would be to recognize that as your husband is recovering, he will need time. And the very first suggestion is, if you're going to have a conversation with him, allow yourself to speak slowly.
Yeah.
Not even kidding. If your husband's working with a therapist that's trying to process through this developmental trauma, one of the things he's doing, he's having a second conversation within himself.
Yeah.
Working with this little kid inside of him saying, okay, when she said, how do you feel? She wants to know how we feel. And there's two different feelings, two different realities going on there as he's processing. One, I'm scared to death.
Yeah.
I'm scared of intimacy. I'm scared of criticism. I'm scared of rejection.
Right.
And I deserve all of it.
Yeah.
So if you give it to me, I deserve it. And it's going to validate that this kid never should have poked his head out in the first place.
And that's where we shame spiral. And the unfaithful, we're masters at shame spiraling. And when we feel shame, we get defensive, we get angry, we lash out, we shut down, we freeze, like you have taught me, in trauma responses, we fight or we flight or we freeze and shut down. We are masters. And I think this helps the betrayed spouse understand why we may be doing some of the things that we're doing. It does not mean, betrayed, that we're not accountable. We are 100% accountable. But this is the dynamic that goes on inside so many of us. And so and we understand the betrayed feeling like, so now, Sam, you want me to talk slow? Not all the time. Just when there is a safe opportunity to do this kind of work, right? This kind of communication, being able to go slow and understand that there's a battle going on inside the unfaithful as there's a battle going on inside the betrayed, that this is one of the ways that you can do it. So on the heels of that, I want you to finish your thought, but what else can the betrayed female do in this scenario, Michael, to help the healing process?
In terms of communication, being able to designate times, we're going to talk about business as usual stuff because we need to deal with the business of the family and the household. But for 15 minutes, we're going to talk about what's going on inside of your husband or inside of you. Because frequently, and I don't know if this is going to be appropriate for the video, chances are there's a little girl inside of you that may well have been having a relationship with this little boy behind both of your backs. And when that little boy and that little girl have a conversation that is not mitigated by two adults, it's going to go bad. It's going to be
right.
Fighting for their needs, maybe even fighting for their psychological reality, fighting for their self-worth. And so speaking slowly will also allow the betrayed spouse to keep a finger on her own pulse. About what's going on in her head. What does she feel? Being willing to set boundaries. And what she's doing, one, protecting herself. emotionally, giving her the space and time that she needs to grieve, but also creating a criteria by which this kid and her husband can know how to behave appropriately and can start developing a predictable, interactive relationship with his spouse.
I see these memes. It drives me bonkers. I saw one last night when I was thinking about our interview that says, you can't heal in the same environment that broke you. Okay, well, that might work for, abusive situations and domestic violence and all that, but it's really a load of crap when it comes to infidelity, because one of the best people that can help you heal, besides an expert therapist like yourself, is your spouse or partner. And it goes vice versa, right?
Speaking slowly, the purpose for that is it allows for processing in the moment. Setting the boundaries, it allows for safety for the kid who's been enmeshed, which we've not discussed yet in this video, that he's not accustomed to boundaries. Boundaries feel like rejection. For the adult, the man, to be processing through the fact that boundaries are good, boundaries are necessary to have a relationship. You can't have a couple if there's one enmeshed glob person. A couple means two people that have a relationship. And so the ability for him to process through what he's feeling requires speaking slowly. I've got two suggestions that go together. One is giving I guess they could go along with boundaries, but giving the husband time, giving the spouse time that is designated to have conversations about how he's doing, so he can explain himself and also bring her into the process of his recovery. But I do mean designated times. You don't want to be distracted by making dinner or doing homework with the kids or watching some TV show. This needs to be eye-to-eye, face-to-face conversation. And chances are that the man is not going to be able to handle more about 5 or 10 minutes because his emotional tolerance window is going to get exceeded pretty quickly.
And that's why it's so important. I haven't once heard you say this, but I'll say it. That's why it's so important that we're dealing with experts, because only an expert can help, in this scenario, a male work through these things, not just with their partner, but on their own, behind the scenes, with someone like you doing this level of work. This isn't, man, and this is why I love the guests that I bring on, because this isn't just do this, and do this. It's going to take 12 to 24 months. You're going to be fine. It just is so much more complicated. It doesn't work that way.
Having designated periods of time, and you can, include those in the boundaries, where the conversation is specifically on the work this man is doing in order to heal himself and be able to fully participate in the relationship as recovery occurs within the relationship. But see, his recovery has got to come first. And in fact, what I've noticed is that when a couple wants to stay together, the betrayed spouse is watching the recovery very closely of their husband, because if he's not recovering, I don't want to let go of my anger. I don't want to let go of my distrust. It's the only thing that's keeping me safe. I got to see him getting better first.
Exactly. And I love, now, if somebody just listened in snippets, you said the Unfaithful's recovery has to come first. That doesn't mean that that's more of a priority. What that means is, if he, in this scenario, is not doing his own private work, we're screwed.
Yeah, because couples stay together because they're kind of operating at an equivalent level.
Yeah.
And so if the betrayed spouse does her work and her husband does not, that is doomed for the relationship.
Yeah.
She will get better. She will move on. She will be able to find love with somebody that can connect with her. And he will continue to struggle exactly where he was.
Right.
So her being able to see the changes in him, him being able to verbalize and sometimes agonize over these tender and painful emotions, maybe even describing what it's like for him to express a need, and also to give her some insight into his internal world that he may have shut her out of, may not even been aware of himself.
That's exactly right. And I think, would you agree that a large part of recovery is opening up each other's internal world to each other in a safe way?
It's intimacy.
Exactly.
To connect with parts of me that are just for you. That's what we all want.
Right.
And what this man is likely discovering as he does his work is that no one has touched those parts of him since they got hurt when he was a kid.
And the beautiful, and I'll end it with this, the beautiful part is when we can help, in this scenario, the betrayed female spouse understand that she can be such a vessel of healing in his life that the relationship could be immensely beautiful, could be immensely redemptive, and the likes of which either of them have maybe never seen before. So, Michael, I got to tell you, I'm exhausted. This has been so good. I appreciate you working through this, because in this scenario, it is eye-opening. And so we're going to bring you back in our next video and talk about the flip of this script. But I think it's just been life-changing to hear your thoughts on this. So thank you.